The night I realized some people lived above the world while the rest of us lived beneath, it was the same night a man I had never met quietly changed the direction of my life. I woke up at 4:17 a.m. to the sound of rain tapping against the tiny basement window beside my bed. The room was barely large enough for a twin mattress, a metal dresser, and the folding chair where I kept my second uniform. Cold air slipped through the old frame, carrying the scent of wet earth and freshly cut grass from the estate grounds above. For a moment I stayed still, staring at the cracked ceiling and listening to the pipes groan inside the walls. The servants' quarters sat below the Romano estate like an afterthought, hidden beneath marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Up there, people drank imported wine and discussed investments worth more than I would earn in 10 lifetimes. Down here, I counted every dollar and hoped my younger sister's medical bills would not arrive before payday. My name is Emily Carter, and at 24 years old, I spent my days making sure other people's lives looked perfect. By 5 o'clock, I was already working. The mansion slowly came alive around me. Coffee brewed in the kitchen. Delivery trucks rolled through the security gates. House staff hurried through hallways polished so brightly they reflected the ceiling lights like mirrors. I moved quietly, carrying fresh linens upstairs while guests still slept behind carved oak doors. Most never looked directly at me. To them, I was part of the furniture, useful when needed, invisible the rest of the time. Around noon, I crossed the grand foyer carrying a basket of pressed tablecloths. Sunlight poured through the enormous windows, turning the marble floor gold. For a second I stopped and looked up at the sweeping staircase. It felt like something from another world. Then a sharp voice cut through the silence. "Emily, keep moving." I lowered my eyes immediately. That was the rule. Always move. Always work. Always remember where you belonged. By evening, storm clouds gathered again over the city skyline. The atmosphere inside the estate shifted. Security guards appeared near entrances. Luxury SUVs arrived one after another. Staff members whispered while setting tables for a late-night gathering. Nobody explained anything, but everyone knew someone important was coming. I carried a tray through the service corridor when I noticed even the senior staff standing straighter than usual. Nervous, careful, waiting. Rain began falling harder against the windows. Headlights suddenly swept across the front courtyard. One black SUV rolled through the gates. Then another. Then a third. The vehicles stopped beneath the covered entrance, and the entire house seemed to hold its breath. I couldn't see clearly from where I stood, but I felt it. The change in the air. The quiet authority. The sense that every person in the mansion was paying attention to a single arrival. I stepped closer to the doorway, curiosity overcoming caution for just a moment. A tall man emerged from the center SUV. Dark coat, straight posture, calm confidence. Even from a distance, people moved aside without being asked. I didn't know his name yet. I didn't know that Adrian Romano owned far more than this estate. I only knew that when he walked through those doors, everyone looked at him. Everyone except him. Because somehow, before the night was over, he would be looking at me. The first thing I noticed was not his face. It was the silence. Not the ordinary kind that filled hallways at midnight, but the kind that settled over an entire house when everyone suddenly remembered their place. I stood near the service entrance holding an empty silver tray against my chest while rain streaked down the tall windows. The staff around me lowered their voices. Some stepped aside entirely. Others pretended to be busy while watching from the corners of their eyes. The man who had stepped from the center SUV walked through the foyer without rushing. He did not need to. The space seemed to move around him instead. His dark coat carried droplets of rain that glimmered beneath the chandelier light. Expensive shoes crossed the marble floor with quiet confidence. He nodded once to the head of security, once to the estate manager. No speeches, no dramatic entrance, just certainty. I told myself to stop staring and get back to work. People like him existed in a different universe from people like me. I turned toward the service corridor and nearly collided with Olivia Hawthorne, one of the regular guests who treated the estate as if she owned it. Her designer handbag brushed against my arm. Her expression tightened immediately. "Watch where you are going," she said. "Sorry," I answered quickly. "Of course you are." She glanced at my uniform before looking away. Honestly, they should keep staff out of sight during important evenings. The words should not have bothered me. I had heard worse. But something about the way she dismissed me made heat rise into my face. I lowered my eyes and continued walking. That was easier than responding. Easier than reminding myself that dignity cost nothing, even when nobody else could see it. The kitchens were chaos. Orders moved in every direction. Plates disappeared as quickly as they arrived. I spent the next hour carrying trays, folding linens, and delivering coffee to conference rooms where conversations stopped the moment I entered. Outside, the storm grew stronger. Wind rattled the windows. Thunder rolled across the estate grounds. Around 10 o'clock, I was crossing the west hallway with a tray of crystal glasses when my foot caught the edge of a carpet runner. The tray tilted. A single glass slipped free. My heart stopped. The glass struck the floor and shattered into sparkling pieces. The sound echoed far louder than it should have. Every head turned. The estate manager appeared almost instantly. Emily. His voice was sharp enough to make me flinch. Do you have any idea how expensive that was? I am sorry. I crouched immediately, gathering pieces. I will pay for it. The words sounded ridiculous the moment they left my mouth. The glass probably cost more than a week of my wages. A few people exchanged amused looks. I felt my cheeks burn. Then another voice entered the silence. Calm. Deep. Controlled. Leave it. Everyone froze. I looked up. Adrian Romano stood at the end of the hallway. His eyes rested briefly on the broken glass before shifting to my hands. Tiny fragments glittered against my skin. Not enough to hurt. Just enough to leave faint red marks. He stepped closer. Not hurried. Not angry. Simply observant. For one strange second it felt as though he noticed details nobody else ever saw. Someone else can clean that up, he said. The manager straightened immediately. Of course, sir. Adrian gave a single nod. Then his gaze met mine for the first time. Not through me. Not around me. Directly at me. The moment lasted only a heartbeat before he continued down the corridor. But long after he disappeared from sight, I could not shake the feeling that something had quietly shifted beneath the surface of my ordinary life. Sleep should have come easily after a 16-hour shift, but that night my mind refused to settle. I lay awake in the narrow bed beneath the estate, listening to rain strike the small basement window and replaying the moment over and over again. Adrian Romano had looked directly at me. It sounded ridiculous even inside my own head. Men like him did not notice women like me. Wealthy guests rarely remembered my face 5 minutes after speaking to me. Yet something about the way his eyes paused on my hands before he walked away stayed with me long after midnight. The next morning arrived too quickly. By 5:30, I was already helping prepare the estate for another day of meetings and visitors. The storm had passed, leaving the grounds washed clean beneath pale sunlight. Everything looked perfect. The gardens, the fountains, the endless rows of trimmed hedges. From a distance, the estate resembled a luxury resort. Up close, it felt more like a small kingdom with rules everyone understood except me. Around noon, word spread through the staff that an important dinner would be held that evening. Additional guests were arriving from New York, Boston, and Chicago. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Uniforms were inspected twice. Silverware was polished until it gleamed. Every detail mattered. I spent most of the afternoon arranging place settings in the grand dining room. Crystal glasses caught the sunlight streaming through 20-foot windows. Fresh flowers filled the air with a faint sweet scent. Everything looked beautiful, untouchable. While adjusting a centerpiece, I overheard 2 housekeepers whispering nearby. He has canceled 3 meetings already. Who? Mr. Romano. That never happens. Exactly. I pretended not to listen, but curiosity tugged at me. From everything I had heard, Adrian Romano valued efficiency above all else. People described him as disciplined, focused, impossible to distract. The conversation ended the moment the estate manager entered the room. By evening, luxury cars once again filled the circular driveway. Guests arrived dressed in tailored suits and designer gowns. Laughter echoed through the halls. Expensive perfume drifted through the air. I moved quietly among them, carrying trays and refilling glasses. Invisible again, comfortable in my role, safe in it. Then I heard a familiar voice behind me. Emily. I froze. Very few people here used my name. I turned and found the estate manager approaching. Mr. Romano wants fresh coffee delivered to the library. My stomach tightened unexpectedly. Me? Yes. Do not keep him waiting. 10 minutes later, I stood outside the library doors balancing a silver tray with a porcelain coffee service. The room beyond was quiet. Warm light spilled beneath the doorway. I took a slow breath and knocked. "Come in." His voice was calm, controlled. I entered carefully. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls. A fire crackled softly in the stone fireplace. Adrian sat behind a large mahogany desk reviewing documents. For a moment, he did not look up. I placed the tray beside him and started to leave. "Your hands." The word stopped me. I glanced back. He was looking at the faint marks left by the shattered glass from the night before. "They healed," I said softly. His expression remained unreadable. "Good." There was a brief silence. Then his attention returned to the papers in front of him. "Thank you, Emily." I stepped into the hallway moments later with my heart beating far faster than it should have. Because somehow the most powerful man in the house knew my name. People say a name is just a word. They are wrong. A name means someone noticed you. Someone remembered. For the rest of that evening, I carried trays through crowded rooms while those two words echoed in my mind. "Thank you, Emily." Not miss. Not excuse me. Not staff. Emily. By the time the last guests left shortly after midnight, exhaustion weighed on my shoulders like wet concrete. I helped clear the dining room, folded linens, and polished silver until every surface reflected light. The estate slowly settled into silence. One by one, chandeliers dimmed. Hallways emptied. Doors closed. Yet something felt different. The next morning began with sunlight pouring across the grounds. The storm was gone. In its place came crisp air and cloudless blue skies stretching for miles beyond the estate. I spent the first hours of my shift working near the East Wing, where several guest suites overlooked the gardens. Most visitors had already departed, but a few remained. Around 10 o'clock, Olivia Hawthorne arrived with two friends for brunch on the terrace. Even from inside, I could hear their laughter drifting through the open doors. I carried fresh coffee outside and carefully placed cups on the table. Finally, Olivia said without looking at me, "I thought we would grow old waiting." Her friends laughed politely. I forced a smile. Years of service work had taught me that dignity often meant staying calm when people expected you to become upset. I turned to leave. "Wait." Olivia's voice stopped me. "You work downstairs, do not you?" "Yes, ma'am." "In the servant quarters?" One of her friends exchanged an uncomfortable glance. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. "Yes." Olivia smiled as though she had discovered something amusing. "Imagine waking up every morning beneath someone else's house." The comment was not loud. It did not need to be. Her friends laughed again, softer this time. Embarrassed, I lowered my eyes and reached for the empty coffee pot. "Have a wonderful morning." Then I walked away before she could say anything else. My hands trembled all the way back to the kitchen. Not because of anger, because I was tired. Tired of being measured by where I slept. Tired of pretending those words never hurt. An hour later, I was arranging flowers in the main foyer when footsteps approached behind me. "Emily." I turned. The estate manager stood there with an expression I could not read. "Mr. Romano is hosting a private dinner tomorrow evening." My stomach tightened instantly. "All right." He specifically requested several staff members for service. He glanced down at the clipboard in his hand. "Including you." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. "Me?" "That is what I said." He continued walking before I could ask another question. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur. Why would Adrian Romano request me? There were dozens of staff members with more experience. People who understood fine dining better than I ever would. The question followed me through every task until sunset painted the estate gold. Later that night, while carrying fresh towels toward the upper floors, I passed the library. The door stood slightly open. Inside, Adrian sat alone beside the fireplace reading. Warm light danced across the room. For a brief second, his eyes lifted from the page. They met mine through the opening. Neither of us spoke. Then something unexpected happened. He smiled. Barely. The smallest hint of one. But it was enough to leave me standing motionless in the hallway long after the door quietly closed again. The following day felt longer than any shift I could remember. From the moment I opened my eyes in the servant quarters, a strange tension followed me everywhere. By afternoon, the estate had transformed once again. Fresh flowers arrived by the truckload. White candles lined the dining room. Crystals sparkled beneath chandeliers that looked like captured starlight. Every detail had been arranged with precision. Every chair measured. Every napkin folded perfectly. The private dinner was clearly important. Important enough that even senior staff moved carefully, speaking in quieter voices than usual. I spent most of the afternoon helping prepare the grand dining room. The scent of polished wood and fresh roses lingered in the air. Outside, golden sunlight stretched across the lawns and fountains. Everything looked peaceful, yet my stomach refused to settle. One question repeated itself again and again. Why had Adrian Romano specifically requested me? Shortly before 6 o'clock, the estate manager gathered the service staff for final instructions. Assignments were handed out. Positions confirmed. Then he looked directly at me. Emily, you will be serving the head table. Several people glanced in my direction. I heard the faintest intake of breath from another server. The head table was reserved for the most important guests. Staff with years of experience usually handled those assignments. Is there a problem? The manager asked. No, sir. Good. The evening began shortly after 7. Luxury cars filled the driveway. Distinguished guests entered through the front doors. Politicians, business leaders, philanthropists, people whose names appeared in newspapers and financial magazines. I moved carefully between tables carrying trays and refilling glasses. Every motion felt deliberate, every step measured. The room hummed with conversation and soft music. Then I noticed Olivia Hawthorne. She was seated only a few feet from the head table. The moment she recognized me serving there, surprise flashed across her face. That surprise quickly turned into something else. Disapproval. During the second course, I approached her table with fresh water. She looked up at me and smiled. It was not a kind smile. Interesting promotion, she said quietly. I wonder how long that will last. Her companions suddenly became very interested in their plates. I kept my expression calm. Can I get you anything else? Confidence, she replied. You seem to be borrowing someone else's. A few people at the table laughed softly. I felt the familiar sting of embarrassment. But this time something inside me resisted. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I was simply done apologizing for existing. I straightened my shoulders. I hope you enjoy your evening, ma'am. Then I walked away. My pulse hammered in my ears. Yet for the first time, I felt proud of myself. An hour later, while serving coffee near the head table, I became aware of a gaze resting on me. I looked up. Adrian sat across from several guests engaged in conversation. He was listening to someone speak. Yet somehow his eyes found mine for a brief moment. Not curious, not amused, observant, as though he had witnessed the entire exchange from across the room. I quickly looked away and continued working. The dinner stretched late into the evening. One by one, guests began leaving. Conversations faded. Chairs emptied. Near midnight, I carried the final tray back toward the kitchen. The corridor was quiet, almost deserted. Then a familiar voice stopped me. Emily. I turned. Adrian stood alone near the library entrance. His jacket rested over one arm. The house had finally grown silent around us. Yes, sir. For a moment, he simply studied me. Then he said something I never expected to hear. You should stop letting people decide your value for you. His words followed me long after I returned to the servant quarters. You should stop letting people decide your value for you. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the small lamp beside the window while rain tapped softly against the glass. The sentence should have felt comforting. Instead, it unsettled me. Because nobody had ever spoken to me that way before. Nobody had ever looked at me as though I was something more than the uniform I wore. The next morning arrived bright and cool. Sunlight spilled across the estate grounds, turning every fountain and garden path into something that belonged in a magazine. I spent the first few hours organizing storage rooms in the East Wing. It was quiet work, the kind I usually enjoyed. Around 11, the estate manager appeared carrying a folder tucked beneath one arm. Emily. I immediately set down the inventory clipboard. Yes, sir. He handed me a sealed envelope. Mr. Romano wants these documents delivered to his office. My pulse stumbled. Now. 20 minutes later, I stood outside Adrian's office. I knocked once. Come in. The room looked different in daylight. Tall windows overlooked the gardens. Shelves lined the walls. Fresh coffee scented the air. Adrian sat behind his desk reviewing several reports. He glanced up as I entered. Thank you. I placed the envelope in front of him. Anything else, sir? Actually, yes. He closed the folder he had been reading. Sit down. For a second I was certain I had misheard him. Staff members did not sit in this office. Certainly not me. I can stand. That was not a request. His tone remained calm, but something in it made arguing seem pointless. Slowly, I lowered myself into the chair across from him, my hands folded neatly in my lap. Adrian studied me for a moment, not in a way that felt uncomfortable, more like he was trying to solve a puzzle. How long have you worked here? 3 years. And before that? Restaurants, hotels, anywhere hiring. A faint nod. College. I smiled sadly. Not yet. Yet. My younger sister has medical expenses. School had to wait. Something shifted behind his eyes. Understanding, perhaps. Or respect. What would you study? Nobody had asked me that question in years. I looked toward the window before answering. Architecture. The word felt strange spoken aloud, like admitting a dream I had hidden for too long. Adrian leaned back slightly. Architecture. I always liked buildings. The way people create something lasting from an empty space. Silence settled between us. Comfortable this time. Then he surprised me again. Bring me your lunch break tomorrow. I blinked. My lunch break. 1 hour. Noon. Why? The corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. Because I want to see the sketches. My heart stopped. What sketches? The ones hidden inside the notebook you carry everywhere. Heat rushed into my face. I had been drawing floor plans and building designs during breaks for years. Nobody was supposed to notice. Adrian Romano had. Tomorrow, he repeated. Then his attention returned to the documents on his desk. The conversation was clearly over. I rose slowly and walked toward the door. My hand had just reached the handle when his voice stopped me one final time. Emily. I turned. Do not give up on that dream. For the rest of the day, I could think of nothing else. The next morning felt strangely important, which made absolutely no sense. I had served hundreds of meals, cleaned countless rooms, and carried enough trays to fill a warehouse. Yet somehow the idea of showing my sketches to Adrian Romano made me more nervous than any of it. By 11:45, I had already changed my mind 3 separate times. First, I would bring the notebook. Then I would not. Then I would. Then I would not. In the end, the worn leather notebook remained tucked beneath my arm as I climbed the stairs toward the main house. My lunch break officially began at noon. At 12 o'clock exactly, I stood outside his office door. I knocked once. Come in. The room looked much the same as the day before. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows. A tray with coffee and sandwiches rested on a small table near the fireplace. Adrian sat reviewing documents, but he closed the folder the moment I entered. You brought it. His eyes moved toward the notebook. Apparently, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Sit down, Emily. This time I did not argue. I took the chair across from him and carefully placed the notebook on the table between us. For several seconds I stared at it. Suddenly, every drawing inside seemed childish. Every page looked incomplete. You can change your mind, Adrian said quietly. No, I took a breath. I am just embarrassed. Why? Because dreams are easier when nobody sees them. Something unreadable passed through his expression. Understanding, perhaps. I slowly opened the notebook. Floor plans filled the pages. Pencil sketches of libraries, museums, townhouses, and public gardens appeared one after another. Notes crowded the margins. Measurements. Design ideas. Structural concepts copied from books borrowed at the public library. Adrian turned each page carefully. He never rushed. Never pretended interest. He actually looked. The realization stunned me more than anything else. Most people saw a waitress, a cleaner, a servant. He was looking at the work itself. Nearly 20 minutes passed in silence. Finally, he closed the notebook and rested one hand on top of it. These are good. I laughed softly. That is a very polite way of saying they need improvement. Everything can improve. His voice remained calm. That does not make them less impressive. I looked away before he could see how much those words meant. Nobody had ever called my work impressive before. Nobody. Adrian stood and walked toward one of the bookshelves. After a moment, he returned carrying a thick hardcover volume. Architecture of American Cities. He placed it in front of me. Take it. I stared at the book. I cannot. You can. This probably costs more than my monthly paycheck. Then it is fortunate I already own it. I could not help smiling. For the first time, he smiled back without restraint. The expression transformed him completely. The distance, the formality, the intimidating reputation. For a brief moment, all of it disappeared. Then a knock interrupted the room. The estate manager entered looking uncomfortable. Sir, your 2 o'clock meeting has arrived. Adrian's expression immediately returned to professional calm. Thank you. I stood and gathered the notebook. As I reached the door, his voice stopped me. Emily. I turned. Do not hide your talent simply because other people failed to see it. I carried those words with me all afternoon. What I did not know was that someone else had seen the entire meeting. And from the far end of the hallway, Olivia Hawthorne was watching with growing suspicion. Some people announced their dislike openly. Others wrap it in smiles and compliments until it becomes harder to recognize. Over the next few days, Olivia Hawthorne perfected the second method. At first, the changes were small. A comment here, a glance there, a conversation that mysteriously stopped whenever I entered the room. I tried to ignore it. Life inside the estate had taught me that drawing attention was rarely a good idea. Yet something had shifted, and everyone seemed to feel it. The morning after my lunch with Adrian, I arrived in the kitchen to find several staff members already whispering. The conversation ended the second I walked through the door. One of the housekeepers offered me an apologetic smile. Another quickly looked away. I told myself it did not matter. People always talked. By noon, however, the atmosphere had become impossible to miss. I was arranging flowers in the main foyer when Olivia appeared with two guests beside her. Their heels clicked sharply against the marble floor. Their laughter echoed through the hall. There she is, Olivia said. The famous one. My hands froze around a vase. Excuse me. Her smile widened. You seem to have become very important lately. The women beside her exchanged amused looks. I felt heat rise in my face. I am just doing my job. Of course you are. Her gaze drifted toward the staircase. Although some people receive more opportunities than others, I could have argued. I could have defended myself. Instead, I remembered Adrian's words. Stop letting people decide your value for you. I lifted the vase and adjusted it carefully. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Then I walked away. My heart pounded all the way to the service corridor. Not because I felt defeated, because for the first time, I had refused to play the role she expected. That evening brought an unexpected surprise. The estate manager approached me shortly before dinner. Emily. Yes, sir. Mr. Romano wants you in the library at 7. My stomach tightened immediately. Did he say why? No. At exactly 7 o'clock, I knocked on the library door. Come in. Adrian stood near one of the windows overlooking the gardens. The sunset painted everything gold beyond the glass. Several large architectural books rested on the table beside him. You wanted to see me? I asked. He nodded. Come here. Curious, I crossed the room. Spread across the table were photographs of historic buildings from New York, Boston, and Chicago. Some were famous. Others I had never seen before. What is this? Research. For what? Adrian studied me for a moment. For your future. I stared at him, certain I had misunderstood. He picked up a brochure and handed it to me. My eyes widened immediately. It was from a respected architecture program in New York. Tuition information filled the pages. Application deadlines. Scholarship opportunities. My throat tightened. Why are you showing me this? Adrian's expression softened slightly. Because talent should not stay hidden in a basement. For several seconds I could not speak. Nobody had ever invested this much belief in me before. Nobody outside my family. The room grew quiet. Sunset light reflected across the bookshelves. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed the hour. Then Adrian said something that changed everything. Emily, I would like you to help me with a project. For a moment, I simply stared at him. A project. The words sounded ordinary, yet coming from Adrian Romano, it carried unexpected weight. What kind of project? I finally asked. He walked toward the table and opened a large folder. Inside were photographs, maps, sketches, and architectural renderings. Several images showed an aging community center on the south side of the city. The building looked worn but proud, the kind of place that had served generations before slowly being forgotten. This property belongs to one of my foundations, Adrian said. It needs to be renovated. I looked down at the plans. There are professional architects for that. There are. He nodded. And they all focused on budgets, statistics, and efficiency. His eyes met mine. You focus on people. The room fell silent. Nobody had ever described me that way before. I glanced back at the photographs. Children played basketball in a cracked parking lot. Elderly residents sat on weathered benches. Families gathered beneath faded awnings. The place felt alive despite its condition. What exactly do you want from me? Adrian slid a sketch pad across the table. Ideas. I laughed softly. You are trusting a woman who serves coffee for a living. No, his voice remained calm. I am trusting a woman who studies architecture every night after everyone else goes to sleep. The certainty in his answer left me speechless. Over the next hour, we reviewed photographs together. I pointed out ways natural light could improve gathering spaces, suggested expanding outdoor seating, proposed creating a reading garden near the east side of the property. Adrian listened carefully, occasionally asking questions, but never interrupting. For the first time in years, I felt like someone valued what was inside my head rather than what I could carry in my hands. When the meeting finally ended, I gathered my notebook and stood. Thank you. The words escaped before I could stop them. Adrian tilted his head slightly. For what? For seeing something in me. His expression softened. Emily, you had that potential long before I noticed it. I left the library with my heart feeling strangely light. Unfortunately, not everyone shared that feeling. The next morning, rumors spread through the estate faster than a summer storm. Staff members whispered when I entered rooms. Conversations stopped abruptly. Curious glances followed me through hallways. By lunchtime, I understood why. Olivia Hawthorne had apparently developed her own version of events. According to her, I was manipulating circumstances to gain special treatment. According to her, no servant received that much attention without a reason. The gossip should not have hurt. Yet it did. Deeply. That evening, while delivering fresh flowers to the West Wing, I overheard two guests discussing me near an open doorway. She is ambitious. Or clever. Either way, people do not rise that quickly without help. I kept walking, head high, shoulders straight, but their words followed me down the corridor. Later that night, I stood alone near the rear gardens watching city lights shimmer in the distance. Cool air brushed against my face. For the first time since arriving at the estate, doubt crept back into my thoughts. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe I was forgetting where I belonged. Then a familiar voice spoke behind me. The people who fear change are usually the first to criticize it. I turned. Adrian stood several feet away beneath the garden lights. His expression was calm, thoughtful, as though he already knew exactly what had been weighing on my mind. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. The garden lights cast soft pools of gold across the stone pathway, while the distant city shimmered beyond the estate walls. I wrapped my arms around myself against the cool evening air and looked away. Maybe they are right, I admitted quietly. The words surprised even me. Adrian remained still. About what? About me forgetting my place. The moment the sentence left my mouth, I regretted it. It sounded small, defeated, like the version of myself I had been trying to leave behind. Adrian studied me carefully before speaking. And where exactly is your place? I laughed softly. You know what I mean. No, his voice was calm. I do not. I looked down at the garden path. People like Olivia believe there are rules. Certain people belong in certain rooms. Certain lives are meant to stay exactly where they started. A faint breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere nearby, water trickled from one of the estate fountains. Adrian's gaze never left me. And do you believe that? He asked. I wanted to answer immediately. Instead, silence stretched between us. Because the truth was complicated. Part of me still believed it. Years of being overlooked had a way of becoming permanent. Sometimes, I finally admitted. Adrian nodded slowly, as though he appreciated honesty more than confidence. When I was 24, he said, everyone around me had opinions about what I should become. I glanced at him, surprised. You? The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Especially me. That answer caught me off guard. Powerful people always seemed born powerful. It was easy to forget they had histories before success. Adrian looked toward the city lights beyond the estate. My father believed strength mattered more than anything else. Other people believed money mattered most. Some thought loyalty was everything. Everyone had expectations. What did you believe? I asked. For a moment, he did not answer. I believed people reveal themselves through choices. His eyes met mine again. And every important choice begins the moment you stop accepting limits someone else created. The words settled quietly between us. Not dramatic. Not rehearsed. Just true. We stood there for several minutes, discussing the community center project. For the first time, I spoke openly about my ideas without apologizing for them. Adrian listened the same way he always did. Completely. Attentively. As though my thoughts deserved space in the conversation. By the time we returned inside, most of the estate had gone quiet. Staff members finished their shifts. Guests retired to their suites. The long hallways felt peaceful beneath the soft glow of antique wall lamps. The following morning brought unexpected news. I was called to the library shortly after breakfast. When I arrived, several folders sat neatly arranged across Adrian's desk. "What is all this?" I asked. "Applications." "For what?" "Architecture programs." My heart nearly stopped. Adrian opened one folder and slid it toward me. Scholarship information filled the pages. Entrance requirements. Deadlines. Financial assistance opportunities. My throat tightened. "You were serious?" "I rarely joke about important things." I stared at the documents. Years of impossible dreams suddenly felt a little closer, a little more real. Then a knock interrupted the moment. The estate manager entered carrying a sealed envelope. His expression seemed unusually tense. "Sir, this arrived for you this morning." Adrian accepted the envelope and opened it. As he read the contents, something changed in his expression. Not anger, not fear. Concern. Real concern. And for the first time since meeting him, I realized there were problems inside his world that even power could not easily solve. The atmosphere inside the estate changed after that envelope arrived. Not dramatically, not in a way most people would notice. But I noticed. Adrian became quieter. Meetings lasted longer. Conversations stopped whenever certain names appeared. The staff felt it too. A tension settled over the house like distant storm clouds gathering beyond the horizon. 2 days passed. I focused on my work and on the architecture applications Adrian had encouraged me to consider. During every free moment, I studied brochures, reviewed requirements, and sketched ideas for the community center project. For the first time in years, the future felt larger than survival. It felt possible. Then everything began to unravel. The trouble started on a Thursday afternoon. I was organizing files in a small office near the library when the estate manager appeared unexpectedly. His expression was unusually severe. "Emily, come with me." My stomach tightened immediately. Did I do something wrong? "Just come." Several staff members looked up as we crossed the hallway. Whispers followed us. Curious glances. The kind people exchanged when they sensed trouble. The estate manager led me directly to the library. Adrian stood near the window. 2 senior advisors occupied the room as well. Nobody looked happy. The moment I entered, the conversation stopped. "What happened?" I asked quietly. No one answered right away. Finally, the estate manager placed a folder on the desk. These documents were found in a restricted archive. I looked down. Architectural plans, budget reports, foundation records. The same community center project Adrian and I had been discussing. Confusion washed through me. "I do not understand." "Your name appears on the access logs," one advisor said. My heart dropped. "That is impossible." The advisor exchanged a glance with the manager. "The records show otherwise." I stared at the paperwork. None of it made sense. I had never entered the archive. I did not even have clearance to access it. Yet there it was. My name. My employee number. Official records suggesting I had viewed confidential information. A terrible realization settled over me. Someone had set this up. I did not do this. My voice sounded small inside the large room. I swear I did not. Nobody spoke. The silence felt worse than an accusation. My chest tightened. 3 years at the estate. 3 years of work. 3 years spent proving I belonged. All of it suddenly balanced on a single moment. I looked toward Adrian. He remained unreadable. Calm. Thoughtful. Impossible to interpret. For several long seconds, he studied the documents. Then he looked at me. Directly. Steadily. "Did you access these files?" My throat tightened. "No." "Did you ask anyone else to access them?" "No." Another silence. My pulse hammered in my ears. Finally, Adrian closed the folder. The sound echoed through the room. Then someone falsified the records. One advisor immediately objected. "With respect, there is evidence." Adrian's gaze shifted toward him. "There is paperwork." His voice remained calm. Controlled. "Evidence requires truth." The room fell silent. Nobody argued further. Relief hit me so suddenly I nearly lost my balance. Adrian had chosen to trust me. Not because the situation looked favorable. Not because it was convenient. Because he believed me. As the meeting ended and the others filed out, I remained standing near the desk. "Thank you," I whispered. Adrian shook his head slightly. "Do not thank me." His expression hardened for the first time. "Someone wanted you blamed for this." A chill ran through me. Why? Adrian looked toward the closed door. That, he said quietly, is exactly what I intend to find out. Trust is a strange thing. You do not truly understand its value until someone offers it when everyone else is ready to take it away. For the next several days, Adrian's decision to stand by me changed everything. Not the rumors. Those continued. Not the suspicious looks from certain guests. Those remained as well. What changed was me. For the first time since arriving at the estate, I stopped trying to convince everyone else of my worth. Adrian had already taught me something more important. The opinions of people determined to misunderstand you rarely deserve your energy. The investigation into the falsified records continued quietly in the background. I focused on work, on the community center project, and on my architecture applications. Life settled into an uneasy routine until a rainy Tuesday evening altered everything again. The estate was hosting a small planning session regarding the community center renovation. Architects, consultants, and foundation representatives had gathered in the glass conservatory overlooking the gardens. Rain tapped steadily against the ceiling above us while sketches and blueprints covered several long tables. I had spent weeks helping organize ideas for the project. Seeing the plans finally come together felt surreal. During a short break, I stepped away from the group to retrieve additional drawings from a storage cabinet connected to the conservatory. The hallway beyond was quiet, empty. As I rounded a corner, I heard voices coming from a partially open office door. Normally, I would have kept walking, but one name stopped me immediately. Adrian Romano. Instinctively, I paused. The voices belonged to two men involved with the foundation. Their conversation was low, hurried, and tense. I could not hear every word, but I heard enough. Financial reports, altered records, missing information connected to the community center project. More importantly, I heard one of them mention the falsified archive access logs that had nearly ruined my reputation. My pulse quickened. They were discussing it as though they already knew who had created them. Suddenly, everything made sense. The missing pieces, the false accusations, the strange tension surrounding the foundation. Someone inside the organization had been manipulating information for months. My foot shifted slightly against the hardwood floor. The sound was tiny, barely noticeable, yet both voices stopped instantly. My heart dropped. I moved away before anyone emerged from the office and returned toward the conservatory as calmly as possible. The meeting continued, but concentration became impossible. My mind replayed every word I had heard. By the time the session ended, rain was falling harder than ever. I found Adrian reviewing plans near one of the windows. I need to tell you something. He immediately noticed the urgency in my voice. What happened? I explained everything. Every detail I could remember. Every name. Every phrase. Adrian listened without interrupting. The more I spoke, the more serious his expression became. When I finally finished, silence settled between us. Rain streaked across the glass overhead. Thunder rumbled softly in the distance. Adrian looked away for a moment, processing what I had told him. Then he returned his gaze to mine. There was no hesitation, no doubt. You may have just helped uncover the truth. Relief flooded through me. Not because I had been proven right. Because for the first time, I felt like more than a spectator in my own life. I had not been rescued. I had contributed. I had helped. Adrian stepped closer, his voice quieter now. Emily, do you realize what you have done? I shook my head. The faintest smile appeared on his face. You protected something important. The truth surfaced quietly. No dramatic confessions. No public spectacle. Just facts placed side by side until they formed a picture nobody could ignore. Within a week, the falsified records were traced back to individuals who had been manipulating foundation documents for their own benefit. The accusations against me disappeared as quickly as they had appeared. Staff members who once whispered suddenly became polite. Guests who had questioned my presence found new reasons to smile. It was strange how quickly opinions changed when the truth became inconvenient. Yet the biggest change was not around me. It was inside me. For years, I had measured my worth by what other people believed. Their approval, their expectations, their judgments. Somewhere along the way, I had forgotten that dignity cannot be handed to you by someone else. It has to come from within. The community center project moved forward faster than anyone expected. Revised plans were approved. New funding arrived. Construction schedules were finalized. Several of my design suggestions remained part of the final proposal. Every time I looked at the blueprints, I felt a small spark of pride. Not because my ideas were perfect, because for the first time, they mattered. A month later, the estate hosted a formal gathering to celebrate the project's official launch. The grand ballroom glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Music drifted softly through the air. Guests filled the room in elegant suits and evening gowns. I spent the early part of the evening helping coordinate logistics, convinced I would remain invisible as usual. Then the estate manager approached me. Mr. Romano would like a word. My heart immediately accelerated. Now. I followed him toward the ballroom entrance. Hundreds of conversations blended together beneath the high ceilings. Laughter echoed across marble floors. At the far end of the room, Adrian stood speaking with foundation donors and community leaders. Confident, composed, entirely in command. Yet the moment he saw me, his attention shifted. Emily. I stepped closer. You wanted to see me? Instead of answering immediately, Adrian turned toward the gathered guests. The room gradually quieted. Conversations faded. Curious faces looked in our direction. I suddenly became aware of every heartbeat, every breath. Adrian raised his glass slightly. Tonight is about community, he began. About investing in people whose potential is often overlooked. Silence settled across the ballroom. His gaze found mine. Sometimes the most valuable contributions come from the person everyone else underestimated. I felt my breath catch. Around us, guests listened attentively. Adrian continued. This project would not exist in its current form without Emily Carter. Shock rippled through the room. I heard whispers, surprise, confusion, but Adrian never looked away. Talent does not care where someone starts. Character does not care about status. And vision does not belong exclusively to the powerful. My eyes burned unexpectedly. Years of doubt seemed to collapse all at once. The basement room, the long shifts, the humiliation, the loneliness, all of it suddenly felt distant. Adrian stepped closer and offered his hand. Not as an employer, not as a benefactor, as an equal. I placed my hand in his. Applause filled the ballroom, yet I barely heard it. Because in that moment, standing beneath the chandeliers I once admired from a distance, I finally understood something important. The greatest journey of my life had never been from the servant quarters to the main house. It had been from self-doubt to self-worth. And somehow, along the way, I had found a man who saw me long before I learned how to see myself.